Welcome back to the channel. What's up everybody? In this video we are going to tear down this Turbo 400 and we're going to reseal it, we're going to clean it all out and kind of just go over the whole thing because it's been sitting for a while. So we have got it set up here on the engine stand now. I had to get some longer bolts here to be able to put a nut on the back side of it. But we've got it on here and I've already kind of removed some covers and stuff. I got the pan off. And the filter, this filter is pretty nasty, so we're going to actually take a good look in here at all of the components and make sure that everything's good. So I'm going to go over a couple things here. We pulled the dipstick out. The dipstick tube goes in right here. We pulled that guy out. I've pulled off the side cover right here, and then I've pulled the pickup tube for the oil filter as well, for the transmission filter. So this is pretty concerning right here. Down in the servo cover, I pulled this cover off and there's some like broken chunks right here. I don't know what the heck's going on with that. And then there's definitely some chew marks around the outside edge of the servo housing. It's going to be interesting to see what we find all in this thing. But at O'Reilly's, I have picked up all the various seals and stuff. What I have here is the transmission filter kit. So it comes with the filter and the gasket for the pan. And then in here we've got the hat gasket, the top hat gasket, which is for the dipstick cover. It doesn't look correct though, but we'll play with it and see what we come up with. So this is what they look like. It doesn't look like that ID hole right there is as big as the dipstick is, but we're not going with the factory dipstick when we go in with this. We're going to go with a low car flexible one because it's going in the Fbody. That's a tight fit. So this other seal here, let's go down. This other seal we have here is this little guy. This is going to be for your speedometer, or no, this is going to be for your shifter lever. So this will go on the other side on this shaft. So once we take this all off, this will go on this shaft right here. And then here is our front seal, our front pump seal, torque converter seal, whatever you want to call it. It's this guy here. There's part number, and our rear seal, tail shaft seal, drive shaft seal, whatever you want to call it. That bad boy right there. So, and for this older GM stuff, it's really surprising how cheap all this was. All of this right here was like 30-35 bucks. So I mean that's pretty freaking cheap. To get all that stuff for 4L60, you'd be looking closer to probably 100 bucks, I would think. So pretty cool to go back in time with something sturdier and everything's cheaper and parts are still good and available for it. Another thing I wanted to point out between these Turbo 400s and a 4L60E is this seems to be quite a bit shorter, a little bit shorter, especially in the tailhouse section here, quite a bit shorter. And I wanted to point out that your output shaft gear is quite a bit bigger in the Turbo 400. So that's one good thing and beefier thing about these is your tail shaft. I want to see the input shaft in is as well, but don't get me lying, I haven't measured this. Visually it does look a little bit smaller, but I do want to put some calipers on there and actually measure it and see what we're working with here. So the next step for these is to continue to clean it up. I want to get some degreaser on here, clean out the case real good, and once we do that, we'll start pulling seals and everything like that. Also wanted to point out this is a deep pan transmission. pan, so it has some type of little modification here for the filter. So this little sleeve, this threads down all the way and seats right here, and then there's actually like a slot, so that I believe it's through this hole here. I believe they do that so that the filter can hang down a little bit further into that deep pan instead of being all the way up here and a bunch of fluid underneath it. I think that may be what's going on there. I'm not very experienced with these Turbo 400s. This is the first one I've ever had. So I'm kind of learning as we go on this. Degreased the transmission. Got her all. So I'm not too sure where I left off with this thing, but this is where we're at right now. It's been pressure washed. There's still some crap and some stuff on there we need to clean off, but I've kind of started scuffing on it some to kind of just, you know, make a fresh surface for the paint to adhere to and all that. So, but what we're going to do right now is it is time to remove some seals. Going to remove those guys and get those out and make sure we have the right ones here. Time to pop some seals. Alright y'all, so we have gotten to the point to where we are cleaning this guy up and about to paint it. Just a minute ago y'all saw me pull the seals out of this thing, so I'll tell you what I've done since then. Just been messing around with this guy some. We got the governor cover off, we've got our solenoid out for the trans brake. Gonna tape everything off on this side, so that's the things we removed from over here. This side, there was like a clamp for like the factory shift cable right here. We took that guy off, and then we took off the shifter lever right here as well. And then the clamp for this rear cover here, we've taken that clamp off. And we have gotten this guy off here. We've got our rear shaft off here, our rear cover off here. And we can see that our bushing in here that the drive shaft rides on is not too worn or anything, so that's a good sign. There is just a couple, like a little bit of wear marks, but nothing crazy, so that's good to go there. We're going to get the mount off this guy and paint this as well. And so that's where we're at. I'm taping off. I've cleaned it. I've scuffed it all with Scotch-Brite, and now I'm taping everything off and we're going to paint this guy up. Everything taped off and covered up that I want covered up. I don't need to cover all this up because we're using a 415 silver, and you brush that on and it self levels, and it's a really strong coating and it looks really good on this. So we got a can of that ordered in, so we're about to start brushing it on. So look at the color of this stuff. It's kind of hard to see in the light. Real silver metallic-y. It looks like a fresh cast aluminum, so that's going to make it look really nice. I like using these coatings on stuff. I'll insert a couple pictures of other stuff we've used them on. It's freaking awesome stuff. Let it begin. So this coating, this stuff goes a long way. So there's a pretty good dollop on the brush there. This will do, I mean, a nice quadrant of this transmission. It spreads and spreads and spreads. So let's see what happens. sitting for a couple hours or so. It's not completely set up because it's kind of cold, but it's good enough for we're going to kind of start buttoning things up. I'll just make sure to try not to touch it any, but this turned out great. So one tip I will say about brushing on the Port 15 is, like I said before, it goes a long ways to put a little dab on it, and I kind of touch around in different spots and then spread out from there. So, and then also, like, you know, you got to kind of dab in there to get into like the little nooks and crannies. So one way to make it look really good to finish out after you're done kind of painting the area, kind of just do a brush stroke in one direction over that area and then do it the same direction around the whole thing. It levels out so you can hardly see any brush strokes at all, but that is one way to really make it look like a very good finish at the end. So after you spread out your paint, then you just kind of go one direction with it all. And we got the pan done as well, and then we have got the tail shaft housing painted. So it is time to start putting stuff together. We're going to start with putting the transmission trans brake solenoid in right here. We're going to clean this up and put a little bit of RTV on the gasket or on the O-ring, and then we'll get the governor cover on. We're going to remove these fittings because we'll be putting adapter fittings in for AN lines, because we're going to be doing an AN line to an aftermarket transmission cooler, external transmission cooler. So we'll remove those, and then we'll roll it over and get the stuff on the other side, and then we'll probably put the transmission filter in, pan on, and we're looking pretty good. So I lied to y'all. We're not ready to start bolting stuff on yet because we need to paint these little couple pieces for the transmission. So this was the solenoid, trans brake solenoid retainer. This is the retainer for that little side. It looks like a freeze plug for an engine, but a little side cover retainer there. This is the shifter lever, and then the governor cover. So we're going to get all these guys cleaned up, and I already got them cleaned up and prepped, and going to go ahead and paint these, and then we can start putting stuff back on to the transmission. Okay, so while we are waiting for these to get a full dry cycle, so these three can be flipped, the other side painted, I'm going to go over here and work on the trans brake solenoid. I'll show you what I'm doing with it real quick. We are going to cut this off and put a better eyelet on here and solder it and heat shrink it. And this side I'm going to solder in a spade terminal that is heat shrinked, covering the outside of it, female, so that whenever we go to install this into the car, you know, that's already good to go. Whatever wire we run into our trans brake button can just be spaded onto that. So I'm going to get this hemmed up real quick, and then we'll get the little pieces painted on the other side, and then we can go back to assembling this. I ordered a gasket for this. It should be at O'Reilly's. I just have to find the time to go get it. I have the filter and pan gasket already, so once we get some of this other stuff buttoned up and let these dry a little more, we'll flip it over and put the pan on it. Really, I'm wanting to hurry and get the trans brake cylinder in first, because there's a little piece in here that anytime I flip it over, it wants to fall out. It's a little rod that goes in there and activates the valve body for the trans brake. So we're going to get the trans brake situated first. we got our ends redone on the solenoid, so this guy is good to go back on. I just came over here and flipped these over and gave them their base coat. This is kind of some glossy black, universal black metallic, so it's going to look pretty cool on there. This one I just gave another good coat on it just so we get some nice even metallic on there. This we are just doing a base, a little light coat, so that we got a base for the rest of the paint to stick to. So, and the reason I'm doing it like way over here in the corner is so that I get like minimal overspray on this, because we're working in limited space here. So I'm trying to do this as far away from the car as I can, and just kind of doing just some light spraying. So hopefully, you know, we don't get nothing crazy on the car. This thing will need a nice, good, deep, clean detail when it's back on the road, but we're going to try and minimize everything we can on it. Alright, so we're waiting on some stuff to dry for the transmission and everything, and just want to show that I've got, try and keep a pretty solid list of everything that's going on here, what's needed, you know, what parts are needed, what I need to do on the different parts of the car, motor, car itself, and looking here to see what is going to be next video. And I think we're going to go ahead and start with doing the trunnion upgrade on the rocker arms for the motor that we're putting together. So that ought to be pretty cool. I've never done it before, so I'm anxious to see how hard it is, and it shouldn't be too bad, I don't think. So we'll see if my press over here, not even my press, my vise will do it. So if it won't, then we may just buy some cheap press to have for now, and go that route. But I think that's what we're going to do for next video, is press some rockers. Be pretty cool. Alright, so I've got the governor cover here. It's dried pretty well, so we're going to go ahead and put this guy on here. At O'Reilly's, this gasket was not available, but it's compressed down, but it didn't come off in pieces, and it didn't seem like it was leaking before. What we're going to do is just throw some silicone around this guy, torque it on there. Shouldn't have any issues. If I do have issues, I'll order one online or something. No big deal, but that's what we're going to do now, and then hopefully when I'm done with this, our other parts are dry, start bolting it all on. So I was going to reuse this hardware, and I was trying to clean it up with some Brillo pad, and each one of these heads is each bolt's a different bolt, but they're the same length, same thread. But I forgot that I went to the store the other day and stocked up, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw some fresh hardware in here with washers and lock washers. Time has come. We're going to go to put the pan and filter on this guy, and as you can see, I didn't paint under here yet. I wanted to get the pan on, and then we'll kind of touch up where the pan doesn't touch. So alright, so we got to put in our pickup tube for the filter here. This little guy's actually marked for the case and the filter, and this one's double O-ringed, I believe, probably to maybe bring this guy a little bit further down, because it is a deep pan. I know there's something special going on with the bolt for the filter, because it's a deep pan. I'll show you all that here in a second, but this is how it was given to me, and this is how it was working before. So it goes right down in here, just all the way down, and it seats down pretty good. There's two little arms that come off to make sure you have it pointing the right direction. So that guy's pushed down in there. Now we'll get our filter kit out. Here's our new filter, and then we got a pan gasket in here, so that's what the kit is. It comes with a filter and a gasket. So it's going to go on just like this, and your bolt will go through this side. Make sure you get your grommet here. We may get some loose transmission fluid here just to lube it up. there it is, just slides right on. And then you can see it wants to lay down up in there. Well, so this is the bolt that was in this when I took it apart. It had this bolt in there, and it's got a stop, and then it had this around it. So I guess the filter, well, no, it was underneath it, so that the filter is somewhat pushed down into the pan further, because it is a deep pan. So this guy, we can slide out to the side for a second. Our spacer goes right here. So look at the sides look the same. So what we'll do actually is take this guy off, drop the bolt through, put our spacer on. Don't drop your spacer. We'll just get it started a couple threads and then get our tube back on. And there's our tube on, and then we will tighten this guy down to where it hits the stop of the bolt, and then this guy will actually have a little bit of room to move, but the bottom of the pan has these little feet that stick up that the pan will sit, or that the filter will sit on in the pan. So we'll go ahead and get this guy tightened down. Alright, so we got our filter installed, so now I'm going to take a scraper and go over this gasket surface. It's already pretty clean. I'm going to go ahead and clean it up here, clean up the pan, and then get the gasket laid out and some silicone on it. Start torquing the pan on. So we're silicone gasket on and silicone on the other side of it, and I went ahead and threaded these bolts in because this gasket's got so many angles. It was wanting to, because they have a bunch up in the box, so it was wanting to like kind of fold all weird. So I went ahead and put the bolts in and kind of thread them through the gasket, so that'll keep the gasket nice and square as we go onto the pan, and we're not fighting it later. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and flip this guy over onto there. We are all sealed up, looking good. This gasket stuck out some from the beginning, but it did kind of push out a little bit. I think we're okay though. We got plenty of silicone, and it was already hanging out some, but this is the old hardware that it came with. I put it back in here because I didn't have new hardware ready. I want to let this silicone set up, and then I'll pull them and replace them one by one. Go around and put fresh hardware in there if we've already done fresh hardware everywhere else. We want to make it look real nice, so that's where we're at. Alright, so I just went through looking for hardware for the pan, and only had 8 of the right length bolts. This is one of the ones that came out of it, but I did have these guys a little bit longer, so I'm just going to mark them, cut them down, and we got the same length bolts. We got some fresh bolts, lock washers, and be nice and fresh. Bolts marked. All right, well my GoPro died, but I went ahead and bolted on the tail shaft housing. Got all new hardware on that guy too. GoPro died right when I was going to punch this guy in, but we got the new seal in right there, the torque converter seal. So this guy's done. This guy's ready to go.